but we thought it would be good to show you this morning the Donorfy Danish tax report and how that's going to work for your organisation, and just talk a little bit about the functionality, give you a demo and give you an opportunity to ask any questions. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction into the Danish tax report, how it's work, what the settings are that you can set up in Donorfy to make it work for your organisation. And then I'm going to hand over to Mark, who has been busy working on this feature, and he's going to give us a demonstration with some demo data that we've got so that you can see it in action, and that we can prove to you that it's not theory anymore, but it actually does exist. Find the right button on my screen. Why won't it go to the next slide? So basically, just to give you an overview of what's going to happen, we've built some CPR validation into Donorfy, which will look at the CPR numbers on your constituents or your individual constituents records, and it will tag any records where the CPR is not valid, so that you can mail those constituents. And then we have built the tax report generation that follows the Danish tax authority specifications. So if you want to go away and read, we can give you the link, but we've built it in accordance with their specification. You'll be able to generate a tax report in Donorfy for the last 3 years. So there'll be a drop down. So for instance, you could run it for this year, or you could run it for last year or the year before. The report will report out 1 row per CPR stroke CVR number. So if you've got a constituent that has the same CPR number, then we would, or sorry, if you've got 2 constituents with the same CPR number or CVR number, then they would be combined into 1 line in your tax report. We also split it out by common or continuous benefit, and we'll come on to that a bit later. Oh, wait. It's possible to run this report more than once. So if you were to run it and kind of submit your bulk, if a supporter rung up and said, why haven't I had this tax relief, you could amend the data, run the report again, and then submit it again to the tax authority, and it would only include any amendments or additions. It wouldn't run it for the whole database again. If you've got a really big database and your file reaches a maximum of 25,000 lines, then we will produce 2 files, as is the recommendation. And we now run a separate file for CPR numbers and CVR numbers. So basically a CPR number would be on an individual's record, and a CVR number would be on an organization or company's record. So you're going to get a file for each. When you're ready to run the file, you'll be prompted with the option to add activities. So once you get to the point of wanting to submit the file, you can update the constituents timeline with an activity to say that you've claimed tax. It will then in that activity tell you the year that you've claimed and how much relief you've claimed. If the constituent has common and continuous benefit, then they'll get 2 activities. So just looking at the settings that we can set up, this is all kind of driven from Donorfy products, which hopefully you're familiar with. So things like memberships and donations. But we've got the relief type, which hopefully means more to you than it does to me, really. But there's the option for common and continuous. there's the non-taxable deductible amount. So this is the amount of the transaction which is not tax deductible. So some organizations have a membership fee where the first, say, 100 krona isn't taxable, and you can put that in, or you can make the whole product tax relievable. And then you can select the calculation method of cumulative or per product. And just to go into an example of that, say we had 3 separate payments of 50 Danish kroner and a non-taxable deductible amount of 10, then if we were to do it per product, we do 50 minus 10 plus 50 minus 10 plus 50 minus 10, and that would be 120 kroner. Or we can do it cumulative, which would result in 50 plus 50 plus 50 minus 10, which equals 140. So I'm now going to stop sharing my screen and hand over to Mark, who's going to give us a demo of how this all works and show us where it all is within the product.
Thanks, Graham. Yeah, I'm just going to run through basically what Graham's described there. It shouldn't take too long. Hopefully it's quite a simple feature for everyone to get their heads around. So the first thing I wanted to go through was that CPR validation. So the CPR validation is built into the tax report, but it's also separate from the tax report as well. So you don't have to use the tax report in order to get that. So I'll run through how you would use the CPR validation using the triggers feature. So under data management, I have my triggers option. And you can see in my triggers that I have 2 examples. One is a manual trigger. So manual trigger gets run at any time when I press the button next to it. And I also have another one, which is a nightly one, which is a scheduled trigger. So I'm going to click on my nightly one just to show you what that means. So I have a trigger which is run on a schedule, and I can set when I want that to run. So my interval is that I'm going to run it daily at midnight, and that this trigger has one option, one action, which is to validate CPR numbers. So this is going to run for me every night at midnight. And what it does is it goes through each of the constituents, does some validation on the CPR number, and adds a tag of either CPR valid or CPR invalid, depending on whether it meets the criteria. So once this is run once, those tags will be available for me, and I can use it to create a list or view it on the constituent profile. So I have a couple of examples here of lists. So this is a constituent list, which has one filter, which is that the constituent must have an active tag of CPR valid. So that is my list there. And I also have another one of basically the reverse of this, which is a constituent list of any constituents which have an active tag of CPR invalid. So this is important for the tax report, because you can't include anyone who has an invalid CPR number. One, because you're not going to know who that person really is or who the organization is. And also, if you try and submit your tax file with an invalid CPR number, the system's going to complain about it. So you can use a list like this to message all of these people to say, sorry, we don't have a CPR number for you, or the CPR number we have for you doesn't look like it's in a valid format. So that's the CPR validation. The next part is the tax file itself. So this is a new option under the financial menu on the left side. You have tax file. This went live yesterday evening, so you should have this in your systems now to play about with. So I'll click on that. And you'll get a bit of a warning at the top here that this feature is in preview. So it's still very new. It's just finished testing, but we wanted to make it available so people could have a look, run some reports, and if anyone has any issues with it, they can let us know. But we'll let you know when it's out of preview. So the first thing I'll do here is look at that settings page. So Graham's already run through some of the settings and what they mean. But this is the settings which define what's going to go into the tax file. The top here is some general settings that go into the header of the tax file. So your organization's CVR number, the name of the sender, which is the organization's name, and the last file number submitted. So you don't have to worry about the last file number that's being submitted. This is an auto incrementing number. So each time you generate a file, it's just going to increase it by 1, but it's something that the tax file is required to include. The bit below is a bit more important. It's what's going to go into the tax file itself. So you can define which type of constituents get included. So there might be some constituent types you don't want to go into the tax file. In my case, I've selected the company constituents and the individual constituents, but I've not selected any of the other ones in this list. And as Graham mentioned earlier, you can build up the different products that I want to go into the tax report. So I've got a donation product, which I want to give the relief type of common to, with a non-tax deductible amount of 10 krona and a calculation method of cumulative. And similarly for the membership product, I've given it a different tax relief just for testing to give me 2 lines in the tax report, and that's going to be per product. So when you're doing this, you can add more rows to this, and you can include any different kinds of products in your system as you wish. So in the tax file tab, under this section here called tax file, you can select which year you want to be doing this for. So I'm going to stick with 2020 and hit refresh. And I can see here I already have my tax file, which I've generated using my test data. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. So if I download this with the download button and open it up, I get a tax file in the format that the reporting system needs. So it says here on my tax file that it's added 10 CPR entries, which is good. And it's also given me a warning here that one of these CPR numbers was found on more than one constituent. So this warning is basically telling us that the likelihood is we have duplicates in the system, and that 2 constituents who have valid transactions that meet the criteria to go in the tax report have the same CPR number. And I can identify those by opening up the file again. And I can look here on the row and look in this column here, because this column here is the constituent number for this row. So this row at the top here I can see is constituent number 2970. They have 2 rows, one for continuous, one for common. And this row here has 2 constituent numbers. So if I was to go into these constituents, they would have the same CPR number. It's not going to cause an issue in the tax file. It's more just in your system. You probably need to identify which one is the right constituent or merge them together. So I'm going to do another quick example of what happens when I've already generated my tax report and I want to make a change to it, or there's some change in the data, so I need to generate a new one. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Maybe someone's called up and said that one of their the data's not right for them, and you look into it, maybe a transaction's missing for them for last year. So I'm going to add a new transaction on this constituent. So this constituent already exists in my tax report. So I'm going to add a donation of 50 krona, and I'm going to give it to the donation product. So if I save that, and then I go back to my tax file system. In order to build the report, I have a button on the right here, which says build report. I expect, assuming my demo data hasn't changed, I expect there to be 1 row in this new tax file, which is this new donation of 50 krona for the constituent who I've just added it for. So I'm just going to build that. It might take a minute or so, let's see. There we go, it came back nice and quickly. So I can see here that I have another tax file, and it says here 1 CPR entries were added to the file, and I don't have any warnings on this one because there was no entries with multiple constituents with the same CPR number. So if I download this file now, I see I have 1 row for this constituent. So constituent number 3124, a donation amount of 50 for, I think that's the common tax relief. And this number here at the end is quite important, the number 1. This shows that this entry in this tax file is a correction to the original one. So if I compare that to the previous one, so I have the original tax file at the top here. So if I highlight the rows just to show you, I have a row here for the constituent 3124 for common tax relief. Same again, 3124 for the continuous tax relief. And at the end it has a 0, which means it's a new submission for this CPR number. And in my second file, I have the correction, which is I've got 50 more going in. And that has the 1 at the end, shows the correction. If, for example, this was a refund, if someone was refunded, say 50 kroner, this would have a value of -50 on the correction. I would suggest that up until the point when you've actually submitted anything, you just delete every tax file that you've generated. So you could have a whole list of 10 tax files in here while you've been building it up and checking the data. Until you've actually submitted it, I suggest just deleting them all and building them again. And that's just going to build it from scratch, and you should have 1 file now with the correct amount in. Let's wait for that to come back. There we go. So now I have 1 file with those 10 entries as it was. When you do submit your tax file, the system, the tax file system, gives you a receipt number for that tax file. So you just have a little text box here where you can enter that number, keep track of the receipts for those, so you know which ones you've submitted, which ones you haven't submitted, and it'll stop you deleting something which you already submitted. So I'll just hit save on that. I think the last thing to run through is the activities. So once you've built up your tax file, there's the ability to add an activity for all of the constituents who exist in that tax file, and that's done quite simply just by hitting update activities. So I'll click that there. You can hit that button at any time, and what it's going to do is just load in all of the tax files, look through all the constituents, and make sure that the 2 activities, the 1 or 2 activities they've got, are up to date. So I'll show you what that looks like on my test constituent. So if I head to the timeline, I have the 2 activities here. They were added today, 17th of December, and I'll just expand those to show you what they look like. So there's a few extra pieces of data in the activity just to show the year of the tax file or the tax relief, the type of tax relief, which is either common or continuous, and the amount. So this person has, for the year 2020, for the common tax relief, an amount of 174 kroner, and a bit further down, for the year 2020 and the continuous tax relief, they have an amount of 15. And I think that's everything from my demo. But yeah, the feature is in preview as of yesterday. If you notice any problems with either the CPR validation or the tax file itself, just submit a support ticket and I'll look at that as soon as possible, and we'll let you know when it's out of preview. I'll pass back over to you, Graham.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Just to follow on really from what Mark said, I just wanted to chat through some support options. I just wanted to highlight to you our knowledge base, which can be found at support.donorfy.com. And once you get to that website, if you scroll right down to the bottom, there is a section here on online fundraising, but under online fundraising, there's a whole article that Mark has kindly written on the Danish tax file. And this kind of summarizes this presentation and talks through all the settings and everything that you need to do in detail. So that's one support option. The other support option is to submit a ticket by emailing support@donorfy.com, and Graham or Mark or one of the team will look at that ticket for you. And I just also wanted to kind of promote the Facebook Donorfy chat in Denmark. We've set up this group for you to connect with one another, to start conversation, to ask questions about anything to do with Donorfy. It doesn't have to be about the tax report, but anything that you want or trying to do with Donorfy, and you might want to find out how other people are doing things. That's a great place to kind of have those conversations. If your question isn't specific to Danish fundraising, then there is also Donorfy chat, which obviously has a load more kind of our clients in it from the UK, and I'm sure they too would love you to be part of that conversation and that community. But we did just think that having a place for the Danish questions and for you to be able to write in Danish and connect with one another would be really helpful for you.